Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live presentation here on my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about Andrea del Sarto's red chalk drawing techniques. This is a really important subject for a lot of you that follow the channel. I've had a lot of you asking me about the different materials that relate to sanguine drawing or red chalk. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about these materials in particular, how masters like Michelangelo and Andrea del Sarto use these materials to create some beautiful drawings. Now, not all red chalk or sanguine is the same, and that's something that I wanted to talk in detail today. I have some photos here. Let's check out this photo that I put together for you guys. It's a photo that describes the different various types of red chalk. And I wanted to bring some light to this subject because a lot of you keep asking me on the chats and also through private email about the differences between, for example, a commercial product such as Conte crayon or even the commercial pencils, Prismacolor, or the general sanguine drawing pencils. How do they compare to the natural red chalk? And I've created this chart here for you guys. I have 5 different types of red chalk available that I was able to source through various websites and things like that. So number one, from left to right, I have Conte crayon, and this is a popular material that is used by a lot of artists worldwide. It's a material that was available since the 19th century at least. And it's a compressed chalk. I imagine that the formula has some sort of wax. And number two, it's natural red chalk. And uh, I guess from number two to through number four, you have various types of red chalk. And I wanted to sort of highlight these materials because, as you could see, they're not the same. Depending on the location of where you find this red chalk and the different mineral contents of these materials, you get different effects and different types of drawing materials. So, number two is a really outstanding material. The demonstration that you will see today is what's done with this material. It's a hematite rich clay base. I would say it has a proportion of hematite and clay. And this is a beautiful compressed natural red chalk that I was able to source through the internet. Now, this is not an easy material to find. If you compare the Conte number one with number two, you see that the Conte is much darker. The color is not as rich, and these are important differences when you see the drawings. For example, drawings that Michelangelo did in his early period, the studies for the Sistine Chapel. You see this very rich reddish color that is rich in iron oxide, and this Conte crayon does not have those qualities. That's something that, for a lot of you that are visiting museums and are probably wondering about these materials, this is an important chart to kind of study and get acquainted with. Now, number three is a type of bowl clay, and you see there that is also very rich. You're able to do some very fine lines, but the content of hematite is not as much. So you get a softer type of red chalk, which you could do a lot of stumping, a lot of blending with this type of chalk, and it's a great material to do very fine transitions. Number two, it's perfect to do hatching. It's a great material to create accents. Number three is a material that it lends itself more to blending the material and creating beautiful transitions. Now, I usually use 3 types of red chalk for my drawings. In this demonstration that you're about to see, these are the techniques of Andrea del Sarto. He was a Renaissance artist, a Florentine artist that was a contemporary of Michelangelo. You'll see a very different approach to his drawings. You'll see his use of red chalk, but in a very different way that Michelangelo used. For example, Michelangelo used, and I'm going to pull up here some drawings from Michelangelo. It seems like Michelangelo uses a very soft red chalk material, in combination with the harder material. So these are creative ways that these masters use this. And I've had a lot of you ask me, well, where do you get the red chalk? Well, it's not just about getting the red chalk; it's also about the idiosyncratic nature of each one of these materials. So, for example, you see that he's probably laying in an initial drawing with this softer material and sort of stumping this material. So, when I say stumping, this is a method that they use. They could use a feather to sort of smear the material. They could also use a rag, a linen rag or a cotton rag, or also silk. And with the finger, they would wrap this cloth around the finger and just sort of stomp out the material and then do the hatches on top or graining. The graining is essentially sharpening the chalk to a fine point and just laying over this initial tone of softer red chalk. And this is a material that it's very versatile. You could do some beautiful transitions, as you could see here in this drawing, early drawing by Michelangelo. You see that there's not much hatching. The material is handled in almost a very beautiful, controlled way, almost like almost like a painting. He's sort of painting with this red ochre, red chalk type material. Now, you could achieve some very beautiful darks with this material by either applying some touches of water on top and saturating the material, or they would also wet the finger with spit and they would just kind of tap on the paper to kind of saturate that material. So it's a beautiful technique that Michelangelo employs here. But Andrea del Sarto does sort of part ways with this technique and he creates a bolder new technique using perhaps a chalk that was harder. So let's just take a look at this other drawing by Michelangelo. Here you see a side by side comparison of a study from the Sistine Chapel of Michelangelo's versus a study of Andrea del Sarto that I'm going to be doing a demonstration today. You see that Michelangelo's using some very fine sort of grain tones, and also with some beautiful hatching. So the material is probably a lot softer in the initial stages. And then in the top layers, he's probably using the harder material to sort of create these very controlled, beautiful hatches or cross hatches. So there's a combination of, you could just immediately see, I mean, as I've been working with these materials, I could see that there's perhaps two different materials that are being employed in this drawing. So just a gorgeous method of employing these materials. Now, the Andrea del Sarto drawing, there you can see that it's very bold. And as I copied this drawing, I realized that sharpening the sanguine to a very fine point did not actually help my cause. I had to keep it it's almost like a brush. I had to keep it kind of bold and use the side of the crayon to sort of create these dark accents. And he's not using the graining, the very fine graining technique that Michelangelo is using in his drawing. So this is something that you're going to see in the demonstration. Now, when you're using, and I want to give you a close up of this drawing by Michelangelo here. So there you can see the very beautiful control hatches. And you don't see those in Andrea del Sarto. The hatching is a lot more bolder. It has some looser strokes. You see the map of the drawing, which is the initial sketching or the lay-in of the drawing. He leaves it sort of exposed. He's not so concerned about the cleanliness of the drawing. He's wanting to just be more expressive with his material. And that's something that, I mean, these materials are sort of dictating how the artist is handling. And that's something that I'm very interested in. In a lot of these drawings or these copies that I do, that's one of the main reasons for copying these drawings. When you're copying a drawing and you're sort of reenacting that process of getting the lines or the hatches or the different qualities, you begin to understand how the artist is sort of adapting the technique to the material that they're using. So depending now, there's something that as I worked with the material, for example, that initial material that I show you, the number two crayon, which is a hematite rich crayon, there's a strange occurrence that happens when you use this material, and it's that it sort of burnishes. The hematite content makes it sort of burnish a little bit, and it gets smoother and harder to use. So you have to continuously turn the crayon to get different types of qualities of line, and also the value of the line varies. So you don't get a very consistent feel as you would with a commercial pencil. I want to go back to that diagram of the red chalk initially that I showed here. So number four is a type of red chalk that is very, very soft. And I was able to secure this material at Secchi's in Florence. For a lot of you that are interested in perhaps securing some of these materials, they do sell this type of red chalk at Secchi's in Florence. And it's very, very soft, very soft. It feels almost like a clay. And you can see that the color's not very dark. It's very frail. It's perfect for laying in a drawing or doing a map, but you're not going to be able to do the very dark lines with this material. So that's important to highlight here. And then you'll see here, for example, in number five is a General's Sanguine pencil. And you see that the color is very, very rich. It's a really bright red color. And I also found the same sort of phenomena. I mean, you could get some beautiful lines. It's very consistent, but you can't get the rich darks as you could do with number two or number three. And number one will give you, perhaps if you're interested in maybe combining two commercial materials, you could combine number one and number five to get that whole range of values in your drawings. Now you see the holders. This is important. The holders, the type of holders that you use, because obviously holding the chalk in your hand and drawing with that is almost nearly impossible. You have to have some great motor skills to do that. So a lot of all of the old masters use the various types of chalk holders. You'll see the traditional brass holder, and this is a brass holder that I was able to get many years ago when I was in school. These were readily available through a store. At the time, it was known as Utrecht. Now I guess it's Blick, and they would sell these for $8.99. Now it seems like these are no longer available. Some of you have shared some links to be able to get these holders once again, but a lot of you have written in the different chats or the email, and they have asked me, well, where do you get these holders? And my answer to that is I do not know. If you have any links that you want to share, you could share them down in the comments below. But you'll see there that the middle holder it's a modern holder. You could use that if you need to use a modern holder. That's okay. And you could also use the reed. I did some other videos recently on the reed pens, and I found that the reed was also used by Renaissance masters. They also use bamboo to mount these chalks, various different types of chalks. You could mount white, black, or red chalk on these holders. And these will allow you to hold the pencil, to hold the chalk in various ways to be able to get the calligraphy. This will be very, very important as you're drawing. And I cannot understate that. I mean, this is probably one of the most important things to get the beautiful calligraphy of these masters. So it will be very important. So I've prepared a demonstration for you guys. And let's just go ahead and take a look at this demonstration. I'm going to just narrate on top of this demonstration, and then I'll let the video run through. So let's just go ahead and get started with that. A map, just like just as I have done in the other chapters. And just to get that, I just want to get the gesture. And I'm going to draw this drawing fairly large, just so it's easier for me to sort of lay in and work with drawing in general. So join the torso here. You can see that Andrea del Sarto does this very, very schematic map underneath. I'm going for the pelvis here. And you have to keep this very light. Otherwise, if you go too video, you see here that I'm laying in the basic initial drawing. And you'll see that essentially I'm laying in with some drawing with some harder chalk. I'm using the ovoidal forms. This is important because you'll see that these masters did not use straights as you see in the French academic drawings. This is a drawing that is considered done in a Mannerist style. Andrea del Sarto used a Mannerist style. What does that mean? Well, essentially, it means that these artists were allied to the style of Michelangelo. And Michelangelo was an artist that was interested in the expressive qualities of anatomy. So they're idealizing the forms. They're all about the forms, essentially, inside form versus outside form. And that's essentially what I'm doing here. I'm going from the inside to the outside. This is something that we learned in school as we studied Italian drawings from the Renaissance. And it's not so much about capturing an outline, it's capturing the actual origin of the form from the inside to the outside. So this is important. So for example, just learning to see the forms in ovoidal structures. So I'm going from the inside, the origin of the inside form to the outside, and just finding the drawing, almost like sculpting the drawing with ovoidal forms. This is something that you'll see Michelangelo do, as well as other artists such as Pontormo, Raphael, and this is very different. It's a very different way that is being taught today in a lot of schools, where they teach students to kind of work with the negative space. This kind of works in a very different fashion. I mean, you're working almost opposite to negative space. So you're going from the inside out. So the origin of the form, meaning, how does the form work in terms of a sphere? And you will be thinking also in light, in terms of light and shade with this method. So you're almost like sculpting the form. And you see that Andrea del Sarto uses this method. The method is described in various manuscripts, and it's a very effective way to get movement. This is a method that was employed by Leonardo da Vinci as well. He abandons the method later on, but Michelangelo kind of becomes the champion of this style. You'll see other artists from the 17th century, such as Rubens, also use this style, and they bring this also to their painting. This is a style that is perfect to capture movement and gesture and strength and also calligraphy. So these things are valued by these masters. You'll see that as I develop the drawing, I'm using a lot of bold strokes to kind of capture the movement of the figure, and I'm not sort of refining the forms through straights. I'm just more interested in the rhythms and the movement. So that's something that you'll see Andrea del Sarto, employ in his drawings. By the way, I want to say hello to everyone that's joining. Thank you for coming by. And if you have any questions, make sure to post it here in the comments. So we're going to continue here with the demonstration. Work right through the figure. Do not commit to lines at the beginning. You're working from the inside out, meaning you're exploring all these volumes in here. So for example, that's a volume that he includes there. And there's a nice overlap here. And then another overlap right there. And this swings out. So there's a lot of movement in these drawings. So I have another form here. this comes in like this. Here I could commit a little bit more to that line. And I have another form that's swinging out like this. And another form that's coming in like this. And maybe even want to, you could do this if you want to kind of bring the drawing back a little bit. And retrace or refine. You could see that he's doing that. I mean, the drawing's not a clean, perfect line. As I worked through this drawing, one of the most important things that I discovered and I learned was that as I'm using the chalk, I found myself using the side of the chalk more than the fine point. The bold strokes that you see in the drawing by Del Sarto, they're very bold, and I don't suspect that he sharpened his crayon very much. I think he was using one of the beautiful qualities of the red chalk is that it keeps its point. You could, by turning the crayon, you could actually get some fine lines regardless whether the crayon is sharpened or not. And that kind of gives you more variation. You're actually better off not sharpening the chalk very, very sharp, because in this case, I could use the side and I could get, some very dark lines. I could get some nice strokes, and it's almost like a painterly technique. So that's something that I discovered. I'm accustomed to sharpening some of these chalks to a very fine point, but to my surprise, that was not the case in this drawing by Andrea del Sarto. It seems like he was shying away from that style and using more of a bolder style, a nice approach, almost like a painterly approach to drawing. And take it back with your finger or a rag. And now I could start possibly committing to some darker accents with almost the tip of the sanguine. So for example, there you can see that there's just subforms, a lot of beautiful subforms there. So let's form here. And then another form that's overlapping right there. That's just going to give you a lot of beautiful clarity to that form. And then I can even bring this up just slightly. And this is part of a nice form here. Make sure you see the form through. So meaning I'm going almost like going inside and outside just to find the origin of the form. Another accent here. Okay. And then I have another form here. You notice how I just started here, but now I'm keying in. And that's the beauty of these drawings. So you could key in, you start very loose with a map, and then you could start narrowing down. Make sure you go from the inside out. So for example, this form comes here, and then there's an overlap there, and then this another overlap underneath here. Okay. And I could key in with some nicer calligraphy, and same thing here. That's for the line. And there's an overlap, beautiful overlap right there. Okay, so yeah, just when you're exploring these. So I have a question here about the type of paper that I'm using. So yes, I'm using a Strathmore tone tan paper as is described. This is a 18 by 24 pad that you could get at any art store. It's a beautiful type of paper. It's kind of smooth, and I found that it works really well with this type of chalk. Now, probably the old masters were using a type of linen paper, and the linen paper does make a difference. It holds the chalk in a very different way. You could probably use a cotton rag laid paper that will be kind of similar. So I I imagine that it was not particularly toned. It was probably a cream color to begin with. But in this case, I'm using a commercially toned paper. It just makes it easier to sort of imitate that tone. Well, at first, it's really difficult to see that. So I'm going to bring this head down just slightly. And I could erase even this. So I'm going to bring this in just slightly. One of the things that you'll notice is that I'm kind of erasing with the finger, and that's one of the beauties of this type of materials. Even though they're soft and you could handle them quite nicely, they're kind of fixed. They're difficult. This one in particular is difficult to erase. So it's perfect for laying in a map or initial sketch in, and then just sort of reinforcing the lines. The other materials, the softer sanguines, erase much easier. This one is much more difficult to erase. So I took the risk of starting with this one. I would have started with a softer one, but to my surprise, it actually went well. It seems that Andrea del Sarto is using a similar type of chalk, and you could see that he just goes over the lines to make them darker. So he's sort of correcting the lines, the outline. So he's not so much interested in the cleaner outline, such as Michelangelo. So it worked in my favor to use this type of chalk. For other drawings, such as the Michelangelo copies that I have done in the past, it's easier to start with the softer sanguine or the softer red chalk because I could manipulate it and create a very clean drawing. And the chin, which it comes to about here, the jaw. Okay. So I just want to be bold with this drawing, as bold as I possibly can, because the artist is very bold. You can see. Okay. He's got a light plane right there, or a dark plane right there. And I'm going to erase some of these lines. And I'm going to go back to some of this modeling. And I also have some information here. It's just giving me overlap. So I have a nice accent there. And then accent there. This is actually coming in. And I have some hatches. You can just see how free he is with this drawing. He's just very bold. So I have a question here about fixing the drawing, whether you wanted to perhaps paint on, transfer this drawing or do it on a canvas. you could probably just work directly with the red chalk on a canvas and paint directly on top of this. It doesn't seem like it's difficult to erase this type of red chalk, the hematite rich red chalk. For the softer kind, the one that is has more clay, perhaps it's more difficult to paint on top. You may need a fixative type of fixative, but this particular kind, you're probably able to work directly with paint on top. You could even seal it with perhaps some in a light imprimatura, and that could fix the drawing directly onto a panel or a canvas. So that's probably a technique that was employed by these masters. Now, most likely the drawing, I mean, what studied from Andrea del Sarto, it seems like he transferred the drawing using perhaps black chalk by putting the black, saturating the paper with black chalk in the opposite side, and then with the stylus transferring and then reinforcing with either paint or ink. That's a technique from the Flemish masters from the north, and you could certainly do that if you needed to transfer or work with the underdrawing. The sanguine. Here you could just see that he goes over the lines because they have a fussy quality. So now I'm just really getting into the modeling here. And I just want to highlight that line right there. And I'm going to start getting some of these accents, nicer lines. Some weird patterns here. He's got almost like a reference to anatomy there. He definitely is putting anatomical points. So for example, here's the pit of the neck, and then he's got nice hatches. In terms of the eraser that I'm using to erase this sanguine, I'm using a kneaded eraser, which is the typical eraser that artists use for drawing. In the old days, they would probably use bread. And I haven't tried the bread with this particular sanguine, but it does work with the softer sanguine. I don't know if this bread would actually lift this type of sanguine. So I imagine that a kneaded eraser, just a common kneaded eraser, you could use to lift the sanguine. Now, the commercial pencils, such as the General's charcoal, or excuse me, the General's sanguine pencil, I believe that the pencil has some wax, and it's probably much more difficult to erase any type of crayon or type of pencil that is wax based. So you just have to experiment. But I don't really I like to just lift the material. So I just tap the paper and I just lift with the eraser. I don't just sort of smear the paper. So I think that's probably the best method to use. So you could just experiment with various types of erasers, though. So yeah, just a lot of description of form. The hatches here, for example, and a lot of overlapping forms. For example, that comes here, and then that come there. And I could just continue to explore some of these darks here, the side of the pencil. Now, I didn't sharpen my in this case, I didn't sharpen my chalk in a very fine point because I want to get this almost this brush feel by creating some of these bold strokes. And sure enough, I'm getting some very similar strokes because the material is handled in a similar way. So just be aware that if you sharpen the pencils, in some cases, throughout the demonstrations that we've been doing, you'll see me sharpen the pencil to a really, really fine point. But that's not always the case with some of the drawings that we've been studying. There's just different techniques. Every master has their own technique, so just be aware of that. Okay, so there's more information here. More information here. Let's work with some of these strokes here. Again, these are just strokes, bold strokes that sort of tell us, gives us a nice hint on how able was, how talented was Andrea del Sarto with his strokes and his calligraphy as a draftsman. I'm going to put some nice bold stroke back here. And there's some nice hatches back here. He does this hatching. This type of hatching that I'm doing is very difficult to do if you don't have a holder. So that's why the holder is so important, because these, I mean, you notice how I'm using almost like the forearm to do the hatches. So if you don't have that, it'll be difficult to really achieve that. So that's why that's almost like a piece of evidence on how these masters were handling these type of materials. And it's well documented. I mean, you see in a lot of even the self-portraits from the era, you'll see the artists use a type of holder, whether it be bamboo or a brass holder. You see that they mounted these chalks in a holder. And it's because they're almost, I mean, these masters were trained with styluses to draw in silver point. So they would have been training with a stylus or perhaps a quill. So that's exactly how they would have probably handled their hatching techniques. So it's very difficult to do hatching if you don't have a holder. So that's plenty of evidence for that. The red sanguine like this. That's why I like this drawing quite a lot. This feels to me like it's almost like a painterly drawing. I'm going to go ahead and use the side of the pencil once again to create some of these deep strokes here. And once again, these are very descriptive of the form of the figure there. But he's really, really keying in on some of the anatomical information. There's a lot of information here. And he's putting some bold strokes right there. And I'm going to put some more bold strokes here. Seems like the modeling style is quite loose, actually. It's just building almost like a tone. So I'm going to continue, and then here, this is just strokes. Beautiful strokes. I found myself really wanting to explore all these anatomical features as I worked on this drawing. I mean, this is a drawing that really focuses on inside form development, and that's something that is very different. That as we're used to drawing shadow masses and light planes, perhaps in our modern training, we don't really tend to think in terms of these volumes inside inside forms. And it was strange to me as I modeled the inside forms, how these anatomical features in this drawing just seemed completely exaggerated. They almost felt like these mechanical forms or these sort of artificial forms. And that's a key feature of Andrea del Sarto's drawings. Michelangelo does the same thing. They're very interested in sort of exposing form, and you see there a close, this is a closer view of this copy. You see how just the arm, for example, he's sort of detailing and highlighting those inside forms, and it's not so focused on outline, although there is a lot of development in the outline, but the outline is a consequence of an inside form. So that's really important to mention here. For a lot of you that are perhaps learning anatomy, the anatomy is really important when drawing the human figure, because you're gonna kind of be lost with with the inside forms if you don't know, for example, where a tricep is, or a deltoid, or a latissimus dorsi. Just knowing these muscles will really help you to kind of understand how the inside form is affecting the outside form. So, by the way, for a lot of you that are interested in, expanding on some of this knowledge, I want to invite you to check out some of my courses on Udemy. Also, we have some courses, live courses that are coming up in the summer through my website, atelierschoolonline.com. For a lot of you that are looking to sort of up your skills, I want to invite you to check out some of these links. Full approach to drawing, you get all these beautiful sense of forms. It seems like that's one of the biggest preoccupations of Renaissance artists, the sense of form. I have some nice bold strokes here. And some deep darks in there. On the side of the pencil, I have a flat point, so that's just allowing me to do that. Getting some nice bold strokes. Here, I could do the same. Putting an accent there. And look at all the information, anatomical information. It's got all these small explorations here of muscles. Nice sharp strokes there, which you could do with the sanguine. You could do very sharp lines. I'm going to go ahead and lift some of these original lines that I had put down. these are just small accents for the muscles. Beautiful sense of form he's achieving with just strokes. Just applying here some of the bolder strokes. And also some strokes here. This is something that is really interesting about this drawing. It's the use of calligraphy. I mean, these masters use and accentuated the idea of calligraphy to create form. That's something that we don't do as much nowadays because we're so used to capturing an image from a photograph, and the photograph sort of gives us a mechanical view of the world. But for these masters, calligraphy was a way to sort of highlight the idea of drawing, the graphic qualities of drawing. So I found myself really understanding the idea of calligraphy, how calligraphy or calligraphic strokes could really accentuate form. We try to, even I'm guilty of this as I draw from photographs. Sometimes I want to sort of erase any sort of idea of mark making, but yet this is the antithesis of that. This is the opposite. This is a drawing that sort of celebrates the idea of mark making, and that's something that we can learn from these masters. They celebrated the idea in the language of drawing, in terms of movement, in terms of anatomy. This is a very expressive drawing because of its mark making, and also because its use of materials and all the other wonderful things that the artist has put into this. Very beautiful sense of calligraphy. And I'm going to go ahead and do nice bold stroke there. And a nice bold stroke here. I'm often asked where I find my sanguine, and that's not an easy question to answer. I mean, I've gotten it from various sources in the past, and usually what I do is I look on the internet. Some people will post, especially in Etsy, that they found a sanguine somewhere, and I have bought some with luck and some with not so much luck. So it's always a toss-up to find nice quality sanguine. But there are some people in the United States, especially out west, that live in Utah, and they're artists, and I think there's a guy that sells it on Etsy. So that's where I've found some of my sanguine in the past. This is a really nice, I believe this one comes from Utah, but I have some from Michigan and various sources. Areas where there's a lot of hematite in clay. Okay, so you can see here, it's just getting nice and solid. So I'm just kind of using the pencil to just kind of fill in those areas. Getting a lot of solidity there. All right, so let's move on to this area here. There's some nice strokes here, for example. And some nice bold strokes here. So there's a lot of free strokes. So there's a very rich system of volumes here that I found myself really wanting to explore with a lot of attention to detail. I did some close-ups of the drawing, study some of the close-ups, and there's a lot of complexity in the strokes. I mean, they go in various directions, and it just goes on and on. The drawing seems like it was done very quickly, but on closer observation, it's a drawing that perhaps there's a lot of investment of time, perhaps a couple hours. So that's something that as you copy these drawings, you kind of learn. I mean, when you first look at a drawing in a website or a reproduction, it's very easy to just sort of come up with well, a very general idea of how that drawing might have been done. But when you start copying the drawing, you kind of realize that that's not the case, that there's a lot of work in a lot of these drawings. And here you see that how the drawing has just been developed further. And eventually, I'm going to be releasing a full course that will have these demonstrations available on the Udemy server. This is just one of many demonstrations that I'm going to be offering for a future course on figure drawing. So, for those of you that are interested, I will be posting those courses in the future. So yeah, so it's a really wonderful exploration to kind of reconstruct these drawings. Uh, we'll never know exactly how the master did it. Of course, these are just various explorations. Just exploring the different materials, the historical materials, and also the mechanisms by which these masters were able to, to draw and to put together these beautiful works of art. So that's probably one of the most important things to say about these exercises. Here you see an extreme close up, and you can see how the material is very compressed and it allows some very fine lines. I mean, there you can get an idea of the scale. That's very difficult to do with commercial materials, and you don't get the beautiful concentrated strokes. I mean, you could get there's some pencils that will allow you to do this. I used to use a pencil by believe it was Staedtler Pit Pastel, a Sanguine, which was a wonderful pencil, and it has similar qualities. But in terms of pressing down and getting darker values with the commercial pencils, that's difficult to do because the material will become waxy. And here you see that it has a matte quality. So that's one of the beautiful qualities of Sanguine. And it's nice to have this close up here where you could see the actual quality of the natural Sanguine. That's difficult to achieve with other materials that that do not have those qualities. I believe that the hematite is important. The hematite content in this material, it allows for some very fine lines, and the material itself is very hard. You'll see now. How do you recognize this material? Well, when you're out in nature and you see perhaps some red clay, it has the same color on the outside than it does in the inside. But with the hematite content, you'll notice that it's almost like it has this kind of shiny red cast, very dark sort of color tinting that it's different from the outside than it is from the inside. The inside seems richer and more orangey. So that's a way to recognize this material. If you're interested in, in finding these materials, that's a peculiar aspect of these crayons. So yeah, there's a lot of beautiful, interesting effects that you could achieve. There's some masters that would actually start with a wash drawing in ink, and then they would go over with the Sanguine as well. So again, these are amazing materials. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I'm willing to ask any answer any questions that you may have. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I want to invite you to subscribe if you've enjoyed this demonstration. I will be doing more presentations in the future dedicated to the old master techniques. As you know, this channel is dedicated to sort of rediscovering these old techniques and exploring a lot of these techniques that have been lost now. So if you do not have any questions, thank you again for joining. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. See you next time.